We're back. John, we're back.
Welcome back.
It feels like it's been like
Welcome back to us.
forever. It feels forever. So we were talking,
Feels like it's been eons.
well, we were talking, I had a trip this weekend and then you had stuff going on. But I went and saw our favorite celebrity this weekend. So I
Who's that,
texted,
Tommy?
I texted Scott on Friday. I was like, look, dude, I'm not going to ask you for an autograph, but I may save a check stub or two. So, but how
Yeah,
awesome was
since the
that?
last time we spoke, Scott has been to Oxford University
Hmm.
to debate the Brits on War and Peace. And a week later, he goes on the Joe Rogan show.
Yeah. Well, the
And he's been the
Oxford
most,
debate's not out yet, I don't think.
oh, yeah, I'm sure they haven't finished editing it yet.
Yeah, I know as of Saturday when I was at his place, he was telling me it hadn't been released yet. So hopefully it's coming out pretty soon. But he wasn't real happy with his performance though. He was like, I kind of took for granted that it was like kind of an easy, like a slam dunk. And then once I realized what the crowd was, I was like, oh, it's too late. Like, so, but,
Yeah, but I mean, basically, he experienced democracy because people vote.
mm,
That's how those debates are settled. And as Scott once said years ago, standing in front of a Coca-Cola sign, ironically, democracy is no way to ensure liberty.
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Mm.
people in that audience had their minds made up.
Hmm.
He wasn't going to change it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Christopher Hitchens said on the X, Christopher Hitchens was on Scott's debate team. And the question was something like, this house would rather go to war with Russia than lose Ukraine. So Scott and Christopher Hitchens and a couple other guys were arguing, don't do that. And Christopher Hitchens said, you know, I talked to people in the audience after the uh, debate was over who said they actually did agree with us, but they felt like peer pressure to vote um, to vote for war with Russia. And I guess the way it works is there's two different doors to leave the room. And
Hmm.
depending on which door you leave, that signals your vote. So it is
Right.
sort of public.
Right. Right. Right.
I mean, that's just shameful, though.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I know it's wrong to go to war with a superpower that has thousands of hydrogen bombs, but like, what are people going to think of me? I'll walk through that door.
What are they going to think of me once
That's
those
shameful.
hydrogen bombs go off?
Yeah. Scott said, like, he joked around about the film Threads, which I've never
Yeah.
seen, but
I
is
haven't
like,
seen it either, but I did hear him talk about this. Yeah.
right, Britain's version of the day after tomorrow. And
Hmm.
he was like, haven't y'all seen Threads? You're going to be burning Star Wars characters, action figures for cooking fuel, which I guess happens in that movie.
Yeah.
And he started off by referring to Britain as Airstrip One, which he said no one thought that was funny. And, you know, quite possibly these people aren't even familiar with their own literature. They haven't read 1984, or they just have no sense of humor.
Yeah. I think it might be a combination of both. Yeah.
But that was his basic thing. He was like,
But he also told me, he said most of the people in the room weren't actually British. He said these were people from other nations closer to the Middle East that just happened to be attending Oxford. So that might be part of the issue too.
that's true. If you
Yeah.
have Ukrainians in the room,
Yeah. Yes.
we demand that England fight for Ukraine, meaning we demand the United States fight for Ukraine.
Right.
Now Scott's thing, he's like, yeah, I'm here from America to tell you we ain't coming.
Yeah, we're not
We're
going
not
to help you.
trading DC for Kiev or London.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a good point that he makes there, but it's just like I don't think people believe that. I really don't think people believe that. And I think that's part of the US's fault being involved all over the world for so long that people are like, no, y'all find a reason to get your fingers into the pie. So,
Yeah, I think I told
and
you
I don't
this.
blame them. I mean,
Maybe
I don't blame people for believing that, because I'm torn on it because it's like if a rational American were running the nation, then no, we would not come and trade DC for Kiev. But if Obama, we very well may.
it's funny too, because if like you're British or anyone in Europe, you should be praying every day the United States doesn't come and get into a direct confrontation with Russia.
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're gonna lose.
Well,
100%
the
you're gonna lose.
likelihood is there going to be a lot of casualties on the friendly side caught by friendly fire by mistake because it kind of becomes indiscriminate at some point in time and you're just bombing potential targets. But we did have a good time. Buck showed up. We hung out. I was at Scott's for probably 7 hours. I'm sure he was tired of me by the time I left. So we got there a little bit after 1 in the afternoon and we stayed till about 8:30 at night. Went ate pizza. Went back to the hotel.
Good living.
Yeah, not bad. It was fun. It was a good vacation. It was my wife had deserved a getaway, and I was like, well, we keep telling Scott that we're going to come see him, so you want to go see Scott? She was like, sure, and so we made arrangements for one of my boys to come down and watch the dogs and feed the chickens and water the plants, so we could get away and not feel like we were just completely shunning our responsibilities. So
Outstanding.
yeah, it worked out. But here we are in this long chapter that we're going to tackle. I think we're going to do half and half. I think we're going to tackle the first section today, and then we'll do the remaining smaller sections of this chapter next week. So I think
A
that's the
wise
best way to
move.
do it. Yeah, I think that's the best way to
That's
do it.
strategery right there.
Right, right, right. Because well, I mean, I've been listening to this thing on audiobook and we find a way to turn like a 35-40 minute chapter into an hour and 45-minute podcast. Well, this chapter here is an hour and 20 minutes, so I'm sure we'd be going for a good three and a half hours on this bad boy.
No doubt.
Yeah. So you want to dive in or you got anything else you want to talk about before we get going? Anything good happening
Let's
in the
get in
world?
there.
I haven't watched the news in months. So,
Well, looks like they're going back to war with Iran.
back to
Um,
war. They stopped the war?
well, they call it a ceasefire. It's
Yeah.
like a, you know,
Yeah.
not exactly a ceasefire because people are still firing, but they've paused major combat operations.
Oh, okay. Okay. At last I
But
heard
different,
the Strait of Hormuz was closed, and then Trump was like, they're going to open it, or we're going to put naval vessels in the strait and ensure that it stays open. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, dude. But I was just,
yeah, it's still essentially closed.
yeah.
Like if the Iranians say you can sail
I
through, you can
figured I've
sail
seen the
through.
gas
If the Iranians
prices.
can't, you can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I just assumed it was closed. I was spending over $4 a gallon in Austin. So I was like, Jesus, that's almost twice the amount of what we pay down here. And down here it's unacceptable that it's over up to $3. So, and it had gone down when he first took office in 2025. When he first came into office, the gas prices dropped almost $1 here, and then this whole war with Iran started, and they went up $1.50 like that overnight. $1.50. It was like, you
Damn.
bastard! You reversed all the good grace you had garnered. So,
I think it's like, I think the estimate I saw was every time the price of a gallon of oil goes up $10, the price, the price of a barrel of oil goes up $10, then the price of a gallon of gas goes up 25 cents.
mm. I saw it as low here.
So
It got as low as 213 at one point.
when Trump first came back in,
Yeah. It didn't stay there for very long, but it got as low as at one point for a couple of days. But it was staying right around like the 225, 226 mark. That's pretty much where it was like kind of had settled at. And now it's up like 370 here, and it's over. It was like 418 in Austin.
you know what I was thinking? I was thinking like if this was like an existential struggle that our nation was engaged in, if there really was another nation that was trying to destroy us
Mm,
and we were in this war of attrition and we were going to have to just pay for more expensive gas or walk more or have less food, like I'm a patriotic American, like I'd be willing to do that and I'd feel like proud and like, yeah, we're going to be, think you can hold out longer than us? No, we can hold out longer than you.
right.
But that's not what this is. This is
No, that's
our
what
government
Iran's going
attack.
through.
That's exactly, yeah, that's what Iran's going through. So it's like,
Mm.
yeah, they're already their society is like built on suffering in a way that ours isn't. But then people are going to be like why? There's going to be potentially food shortages and gas is $20 a gallon. And like, but for what? You can't even articulate what it is. You give us different lies every day.
Yeah.
There's the Israel piece. Now you're talking about invading Cuba. Like, you can just see how, like DC and Scott Horton has described it this way. It might as well just be like an island floating off the coast of America, like totally separate and detached.
Mm,
It sucks up the wealth from this country, but then it just serves all these different special interest groups, many of whom are just like diaspora from places around the world, like Israel or Cuba or Venezuela, that want the empire to go and settle old scores and put them in power, or put their side in power back in the homeland.
hmm
And that's crazy. Like who's telling Trump, hey, yeah, we haven't finished losing this war against Iran. Let's go invade Cuba.
We haven't finished losing this
Our
war.
and it's funny too is Cuba is like it's like our Taiwan.
Right.
We're over here lecturing the Chinese like y'all better not mess with Taiwan. All right, we're going into Cuba.
hmm I did
The
see
lack of
somebody talking
self-awareness is
about,
shocking.
I saw somebody was saying that Trump was like serious about making Venezuela the 51st state. And I was like, that's impossible. Canada's already the 51st state. Venezuela has to be the 52nd state. So there's to all my Canadian brethren out there that get pissed off when somebody jokes about that, which I think it's still funny. So cheers, guys. All right. Well, let's dive into this.
Get some.
Tactics. We will either find a way or make one. Hannibal. Tactics means doing what you can with what you have. Tactics are those consciously deliberate acts by which human beings live with each other and deal with the world around them. In the world of give and take, tactics is the art of how to take and how to give. Here, our concern is with the tactic of taking, how the have nots can take power away from the haves. For an elementary illustration of tactics, take parts of your face as the point of reference. your eyes, your ears, and your nose. First, the eyes. If you have organized a vast, mass based people's organization, you can parade it visibly before the enemy and openly show your power. Second, the ears. If your organization is small in numbers, then do what Gideon did. Conceal the members in the dark, but raise a din and clamor that will make the listener believe that your organization numbers many more than it does. Third, the noise. If your organization is too tiny, even for noise, stink up the place. I'm sorry, the nose. The nose. If your organization is too tiny for noise, stink up the place. Always remember the first rule of power tactics. Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. The second rule is never go outside the experience of your people. When an action or tactic is outside the experience of the people, the result is confusion, fear, and retreat. It also means a collapse of communication, as we have noted. The third rule is wherever possible, go outside of the experience of the enemy. Here you want to cause confusion, fear, and retreat. General William T. Sherman, whose name still causes a frenzied reaction throughout the South, provided a classic example of going outside the enemy's experience. Did you see how frenzy I was? Until Sherman, military tactics and strategies were based on standard patterns. All armies had fronts, rears, flanks, lines of communication, and lines of supply. Military campaigns were aimed at such standard objectives as rolling up the flanks of the enemy army or cutting the lines of the supply or lines of communication or moving around to attack from the rear. When Sherman cut loose on his famous march to the sea, he had no front or rear lines of supplies or any other lines. He was on the loose and living on the land. The South, confronted with this new form of military invasion, reacted with confusion, panic, terror, and collapse. Exactly how I reacted when I read his name. Sherman swept on to inevitable victory. It was the same tactic that, years later, in the early days of World War II, the Nazi Panzer tank divisions emulated in their far flung sweeps into enemy territory, as did our own General Patton with the American 3rd Armored Division. The
Wait, I'm
fourth rule,
sorry.
yeah,
Did
go
he
ahead.
just did he just compare the the army of the North to the Nazis?
And to General
I think he
Patton.
did.
Yes, he did.
And to General Patton.
Yes.
And I thought that was funny when I read that. I was thinking about something you said, I think in our last uh, installment, that there's been many iterations of the United States, and you're not living under the iteration of the Constitution anymore. You're living under the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about those different iterations and where does these domestic mythologies about like the evil white people and the oppressed black people, come from. And I'm thinking that part of it is from the Civil War, where there's kind of a narrative that like, look, there's the evil white people in the South. They all have slaves, the noble black people. Then there's the good people in the North that wanted to save those slaves. And you see the Civil War invoked a lot, even like in contemporary rhetoric. People will say things like we should have exterminated the South, like we should have like been harder on them. We got all this white supremacy now because we didn't handle it back then.
Yeah.
And I remember
Yeah.
being a kid in Massachusetts public elementary school, and like the very liberal um, school marms telling us about General Sherman, and it was like, you're supposed to be proud. Like this guy's burned everything in the South as he marched to the sea and
Mm-hmm.
like took no prisoners. Like that's how the North defeated the South. So like that's definitely playing into these mythologies that we have today.
Right. And there's also this whole thing that's kind of been flowing through this entire book of there's no hard fast rule, right? So if the Nazis exterminate the Jews, that genocide is bad. But if the North had exterminated the South, that genocide is good. So genocide isn't always bad and it's not always good. It just depends on the utility of the genocide and what the results are. So that's a very utilitarian aspect of this entire text is there's not one hard fast rule. There's not an objective truth. There's not an objective morality. Morality is based upon the objective, right? So if your objective is for for the United States to level out and create a stable foundation in which there are people that can uplift themselves up into the higher classes of society and into the wealthier classes of society, but to stabilize those wealthier classes. And if it takes stabilizing, if stabilizing those wealthier classes entails allowing some upward momentum from the lower classes, then we can allow that upward momentum. And the point of this book is like, no, we need to stabilize the lower class as that upper class. And if that means that we have to allow some of that upper class to remain upper class in exchange for that upward momentum of the lower class, then that's okay. But it is not okay for the entire upper class to remain stable in their upper class society with only a few of the lower class in upward mobility. No, we got to have all of them move upward. And whatever that means is what it means. But the whole objective is to move the lower class to the upper class, to overthrow, to overturn, to flip the tables of the temple.
That was a really nice turn of phrase. That morality is about, there's no objective morality. Morality is about the objective.
Yeah.
That was nicely said.
Thought of it on the spot. Just came to me. Or as Socrates would say, I have a demon in my ear that whispers these things to me. All right. So the fourth rule is make the enemy live up to their own book of rules. You can kill them with this, for they can no more obey their own rules than the Christian church can live up to Christianity. The fourth rule carries within it the fifth rule. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. It is almost impossible to counterattack ridicule. Also, it infuriates the opposition, who then react to your advantage. The sixth rule is a good tactic is one that your people enjoy. If your people are not having a ball doing it, there is something very wrong with the tactics. That's, that's why that I was watching that porn that one day and that chick had BLM across her stomach. She was really enjoying herself. I'm kidding. The seventh rule, a tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Man can sustain militant interest in any issue for only a limited time, after which it becomes a ritualistic commitment, like going to church on Sunday mornings. New issues and crises are always developing, and one's reaction becomes, well, my heart bleeds for these people, and I'm all for the boycott. But after all, there are other important things in life, and there it goes. The eighth rule, keep the pressure on with different tactics and actions, and utilize all events of the period for your purpose. The ninth rule, the threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. Well, it's actually your anticipation of the result is more terrifying. I don't know if the threat itself is more terrifying, but definitely how you anticipate what the result will be is definitely more terrifying. People go through life. It's one of the core tenets I taught my children when I was raising them. And I was like, look, Courage is not the absence of fear, it's taking action despite the presence of fear. And because a lot of times the fear that you feel towards something is because of the unknown of what that something is. And it's usually like elevated by your imagination. And that anticipation of the potential horrific like result of this action is actually far worse than what actually happens. And it's usually not as bad as you think it's going to be.
In the the Game of Thrones books,
Mm,
the character Arya Stark, her sword fighting mentor, teaches her. He has some saying. It's like fear cuts deeper than steel, and she always says that to herself when she's scared
mm,
throughout the books. And another thing that's cool about that is like that's something that like they teach in chess. When you're playing chess, sometimes the actual like threat of capturing a piece is more useful to you than actually capturing the piece, which I
mm.
think is so funny because the the politicians and the pundits, they're always talking about like the government is like playing chess, like a different dimension of chess, or like there's playing chess. And Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a book, The Grand Chessboard, and they're always talking about like we got to take out Iran and like remove that piece from the board. But they never actually say anything that's analogous to like um, chess principles.
Right.
And I've never heard anyone be like, the like threat that we could bomb Iran, that's actually more useful to us than actually bombing them. Like once we start bombing them, that's going to have all these negative repercussions on us. No, it's like we got to go in there and we got to bomb them. And I'm like, and like, yeah, like we're playing chess. I'm like, have you guys actually played chess? I don't think you have. And if you have, I think you lose all the time. Because that's not how you play chess.
Yeah.
So it's funny that he was kind of like keyed into that idea. That was like one place in the book where I was like, oh, okay. Touche, Olinsky.
Yeah. Yeah. If Zbigniew Brzezinski was playing chess, then Donald Trump is playing Connect Four, and Lindsey Graham is playing Shoots and Ladders. Would that mean that Biden is playing 52 pickup? I don't know.
He's just looking at the cards on the ground.
Yeah, he's just like,
Come on, man.
that's not an Uno. The 10th rule, the major premise for tactic is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition. It is this unceasing pressure that results in the reactions from the opposition that are essential for the success of the campaign. It should be remembered not only that the action is in the reaction, but that action is itself the consequence of reaction and of reaction to the reaction ad infinitum. The pressure produces the reaction, and constant pressure sustains action. The 11th rule is if you push a negative hard and deep enough, it will break through into its counter side. Oh, see, he's playing Shoots and Ladders too. This is based on the principle that every positive has its negative. We have already seen the conversion of the negative into the positive in Mahatma Gandhi's development of the tactic of passive resistance. One corporation we organized against responded to the continuous application of pressure by burglarizing my home and then using the keys taken in the burglary to burglarize the offices of the industrial area's foundation where I work. The panic in this corporation was clear from the nature of the burglaries, for nothing was taken in either burglary to make it seem that the thieves were interested in ordinary loot. They took only the records that applied to the corporation. Even the most amateurish burglar would have had more sense than to do what the private detective agency hired by that corporation did. The police departments in California and Chicago agreed that the corporation might just as well have left its fingerprints all over the place. This reminds me of a story I heard in Houston years ago, probably like 15, 20 years ago. So there was this dude, he had left his car running when he ran into the gas station to grab a Coke. He ran in, grabbed a Coke, came back, and somebody had stolen his car. And so he called the police, filed a report, et cetera, et cetera. Got a ride home, went home that night, woke up the next morning, walked outside, and his car was sitting in the driveway with the keys in it and a note that said, "Hey, man, I'm sorry I stole your car. I got down the road a ways and I realized I saw the pictures of your family and I realized I had stolen a real person's car and that this would be real detrimental to you. So I returned it and here is our two tickets to tonight's Houston Rockets game. And so for all the trouble that you had to go through." So that night, that guy took his wife to the Rockets game and they had a great time. And he came home and the whole house was wiped out. The dude had made copies of all his keys and freaking brought the car back, dropped two Rockets tickets off, and went in there and stole everything out of his house while they were at the Rockets game.
Damn.
Yeah. So never trust a thief, fellas. In a fight, almost anything goes. It almost reaches the point where you stop to apologize if a chance blow lands above the belt. When a corporation bungles like the one that burglarized my home and office, my visible public reaction is shock, horror, and moral outrage. In this case, we let it be known that sooner or later it would be confronted with this crime as well as with a whole series of other derelictions before a United States Senate subcommittee investigation. Once sworn in with congressional immunity, we would make these actions public. This threat, plus the fact that an attempt on my life had been made in Southern California, had the corporation on a spot where it would be publicly suspect in the event of assassination. At one point, I found myself in a 30-room motel in which every other room was occupied by their security men. This became another devil in the closet to haunt this corporation and to keep the pressure on. The 12th rule: the price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. You cannot risk being trapped by the enemy in his sudden agreement with your demand and saying, "You're right, we don't know what to do about this issue. Now you tell us." The 13th rule: pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. In conflict tactics, there are certain rules that the organizer should always regard as universalities. One is that the opposition must be singled out as the target and frozen. By this, I mean that in a complex, interrelated urban society, it becomes increasingly difficult to single out who is to blame for any particular evil. There is a constant and somewhat legitimate passing of the buck. In these times of urbanization, complex metropolitan governments, the complexities of major interlocked corporations, and the interlocking of political life between cities and counties and metropolitan authorities, the problem that threatens to loom more and more is that of identifying the enemy. Obviously, there is no point to tactics unless one has a target upon which to center the attacks. One big problem is a constant shifting of responsibility from one jurisdiction to another. Individuals and bureaus, one after another, disclaim responsibility for particular conditions, attributing the authority for any change to some other force. In a corporation, one gets the situation where the president of the corporation says that he does not have the responsibility. It is up to the board of trustees or the board of directors. The board of directors can shift it over to the stockholders, et cetera, et cetera. And the same thing goes, for example, on the board of education appointments in the city of Chicago, where an extra legal committee is empowered to make selections of nominees for the board, and the mayor then uses his legal powers to select names from that list. When the mayor is attacked for not having any blacks on the list, he shifts the responsibility over to the committee, pointing out that he has to select those names from a list submitted by the committee. And if the list is all white, then he has no responsibility. The committee can shift the responsibility back by pointing out that it is the mayor who has the authority to select the names. And so it goes in a comic, if it were not so tragic, routine of who's on first or under which shell is the P hidden. The same evasion of responsibility is to be found in all areas of life and other areas of City Hall urban renewal departments, who say the responsibility is over here and somebody else says the responsibility is over there. The city says it is a state responsibility, and the state says it is a federal responsibility, and the federal government passes it back to the local community, and on ad infinitum. It should be borne in mind that the target is always trying to shift responsibility to get out of being the target. There is a constant squirming and moving in strategy, purposeful and malicious at times, other times just for straight self survival, on the part of the designated target. The forces for change must keep this in mind and pin that target down securely. If an organization permits responsibility to be diffused and distributed in a number of areas, attack becomes impossible. I remember specifically that when the Woodlawn organization started the campaign against public school segregation, both the superintendent of schools and the chairman of the Board of Education vehemently denied any racist segregationist practices in the Chicago public school system. They took the position that they did not even have any racial identification data in their files, so they did not know which of their students were black and which were white. As for the fact that we had all white schools and all black schools, well, that's just the way it was. If we had been confronted with a politically sophisticated school superintendent, he could have very well replied, "Look, when I came to Chicago, the city school system was following, as it is now, a neighborhood school policy. Chicago's neighborhoods are segregated. There are white neighborhoods and black neighborhoods, and therefore you have white schools and black schools. Why attack me? Why not attack the segregated neighborhoods and change them?" He would have had a valid point of sorts. I still shiver when I think of this possibility, but the segregated neighborhoods would have passed the buck to someone else, and so it would have gone into a dog chasing his tail pattern, and it would have been a 15-year job to try to break down the segregated residential pattern of Chicago. We did not have the power to start that kind of a conflict. One of the criteria in picking your target is the target's vulnerability. Where do you have the power to start? Furthermore, any target can always say, "Why do you center on me when there are others to blame as well?" When you freeze the target, you disregard these arguments and, for the moment, all the others to blame. Then, as you zero
Speaking of
in,
freezing,
yeah,
speaking of freezing the target,
yes, sir.
ICE,
Ice, baby.
Immigration Customs Enforcement. That's the the agency that's been frozen and been the protests and the anger has been targeting. Because often right alongside them is the border patrol guys. It's a whole different agency. And in
Yes.
Minneapolis, ICE killed that woman, but then border patrol killed that guy.
Hmm.
So they come up in the rhetoric sometimes, but usually it's just focused on ICE. And even if like they sent the Marines in to round up illegal immigrants, there would be a decision that would have to be made in like the higher ups of the people trying to destroy society. Are we going to shift to demonizing the Marines? That's the military. People kind of view that as sacred. Or we're going to keep it on ICE and kind of blame them and vilify them, even when they're not the ones that did it.
You put ice on ice.
They froze ICE. And ICE is like, hey, why are you mad at us? We're just trying to remove these violent rapists from the neighborhoods. What the hell?
And ice is like, "We're freezer burn. Please stop freezing us." "We were water yesterday. We're ice today. What the hell are you doing? We can't take it any colder. It's just, we've taken it as cold as we can." Yeah, man, I don't know. It's not just them. Like the who was that chick that got fired? That was the head of ICE, head of DHS. Nome, Christy Nome.
Christino.
She made it so easy for people to attack them, though. You know, it's not so easy to attack Border Patrol. Border Patrol is kind of like they're kind of low level. They kind of just almost like beat cops the way they interact with the public, right? So it's a lot harder, a lot more difficult to attack them, especially with the kind of scum that they have to deal with on the borders. It's much easier to attack straight at ICE because that was like Christy Nome's pet project, right? That was her thing. That was what she was really like engaged in. And so, really, an attack on ICE was an attack on Christy Nome, but Christy Nome made it so goddamn easy to attack her that it was just like, what are we supposed to do? Like, quit trying to act like a hard ass, right? Like, you can be you can be tough on crime. You can be strict, like a strict parent, without being an abusive parent, and you can be tough on crime without being an abusive, like authoritarian tyrant. Like, it's not it's not the same thing. It's not synonymous. So that's part of the, oh shit, I'm bleeding everywhere. Okay. Oh, all right. My bad.
You okay?
Yeah, my elbow's bleeding. I had like we were sitting at a picnic table yesterday and I'd sat with my elbow and I guess I just shifted it and it pulled the skin off. And I guess just sitting here leaning on my elbow a while ago, I just busted it open. I realized
Ouch.
I was bleeding when I stuck to my desk. So I was like, why am I stuck to the desk? I was like, oh shit, there's blood everywhere. So,
Man, you're
but yeah,
bleeding for the cause right now.
yeah, I'm good. I'll get a transfusion when we're done. So, all right. Anyway, maybe I need to freeze and zero in on that target. Get some Neosporin and a Band-Aid. But anyway, so then as you zero in and freeze your target and carry out your attack, all the others come out of the woodwork very soon. They become visible by their support of the target. The other important point in the choosing of a target is that it must be a personification, not something general and abstract, such as a community's segregated practices or a major corporation or city hall. It is not possible to develop the necessary hostility against, say, City Hall, which, after all, is a concrete, physical, inanimate structure, or against a corporation, which has no soul or identity, or a public school administration, which, again, is an inanimate system. John L. Lewis, the leader of the radical CIO labor organization in the 1930s, was fully aware of this, and as a consequence, the CIO never attacked General Motors. They always attacked its president, Alfred Ice Water in his veins Sloan, and they tried to freeze him, but he had ice water in his veins. They never attacked the Republic Steel Corporation, but always its president, Bloodied Hands, Tom Girdler. What a name, Girdler. It's like cousin of the Riddler. And so with us, when we attacked the then superintendent of the Chicago public school system, Benjamin Willis, let nothing get you off your target. It's like when Lent was going on, there was in Israel there was this whole thing going on where they weren't letting people have access to the the church, the oh, what is it? The it's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, they had stopped Bishop Pizzaballa, which is, I'm sorry, I couldn't help but laugh about the dude's name. I mean, I was like, it's Bishop Pizzaballa. He sounds like a bad guy from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles who like was running around with Shredder or something. Like it's like I'm a Pizzaballa.
You know, when Pizza Baller gets there, you're gonna be in a lot of trouble. You don't let him in the church.
It was just funny. I don't know. So I see these names and I thought of that. And I'm like, these guys' names are insane. But anyway, enough of that nonsense. I'm being silly. With this focus comes a polarization. As we have indicated before, all issues must be polarized if action is to follow. The classic statement on polarization comes from Christ. He that is not with me is against me. Luke 11:23. He allowed no middle ground to the money changers in the temple. One acts decisively only in the conviction that all the angels are on one side and all the devils on the other. A leader may struggle toward a decision and weigh the merits and demerits of a situation which is 52% positive and 48% negative. But once the decision is reached, he must assume that his cause is 100% positive and the opposition 100% negative. He can't toss forever in limbo and avoid decision. He can't weigh arguments or reflect endlessly. He must decide and act. Otherwise, there are Hamlet's words, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Many liberals during our attack on the then school superintendent were pointing out that after all, he was a 100% devil. He was a regular churchgoer. He was a good family man, and he was generous in his contributions to charity. Can you imagine in the arena of conflict charging that so and so is a racist bastard and then diluting the impact of the attack with qualifying remarks such as, he is a good church going man, generous to charity, and a good husband? This becomes political idiocy. An excellent illustration of the importance of polarization here was cited by Ruth McKinney in Industrial Valley, her classical study of the beginning of organization of the rubber works in Akron, Ohio. John L. Lewis faced the mountaineer workers of Akron calmly. He had taken the trouble to prepare himself with exact information about the rubber industry and the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. He made no vague general speech, the kind the rubber workers were used to hearing from Green, then president of the AF of L. Lewis named names and quoted figures. His audience was startled and pleased when he called Cliff Slusser by name, described him, and finally denounced him. The AF of L leaders who used to come into Akron in the old days were generally doing well if they remembered who Paul Litchfield was. The Lewis speech was a battle cry, a challenge. He started off by recalling the vast profits the rubber companies had always made, even during the deepest days of the Depression. He mentioned the Goodyear labor policy and quoted Mr. Litchfield's pious opinions about the partnership of labor and capital. What he said in his deep, passionate voice have Goodyear workers gotten out of the growth of the company? His audience squirmed in its seats, listening with almost painful fervor. Partnership, he sneered. Well, labor and capital may be partners in theory, but they are enemies in fact. The rubber workers listened to this with surprise and great excitement. William Green used to tell them about the partnership of labor and capital nearly as eloquently as Paul Litchfield. Here was a man who put into words what eloquent and educated and even elegant words, facts they knew to be true from their own experience. Here was a man who said things that made real sense to a guy who worked on a tire machine at Goodyear. Organize, Lewis shouted, and his voice echoed from the beams of the armory. Organize, he said, pounding the speaking pulpit until it jumped. Organize. Go to Goodyear and tell them you want some of those stock dividends. Say, so we're supposed to be partners, are we? Well, we're not. We're enemies. The real action is in the enemy's reaction. The enemy properly goaded and guided in his reaction will be your major strength. Tactics like organization, like life, require that you move with the action. The scene is Rochester, New York, the home of Eastman Kodak, or rather Eastman Kodak, the home of Rochester. Rochester is literally dominated by this industrial giant. For anyone to fight or publicly challenge Kodak is in itself completely outside of Rochester's experience. Even to this day, this company does not have a labor union. Its attitudes toward the general public make paternalistic feudalism look like participatory democracy. Rochester prides itself on being one of America's cultural crown jewels. It has its liberal libraries, school system, university, museums, and its well-known symphony. As previously mentioned, we were coming in on the invitation of the Black Ghetto to organize them. They literally organized to invite us in. The city was in a state of hysteria and fear at the very mention of my name. Whatever I did was news. Even my old friend and tutor, John L. Lewis, called me and affectionately growled, I resent the fact that you are more hated in Rochester than I was. This was the setting. One of the first times I arrived at the airport, I was surrounded by reporters from the media. The first question was what I thought about Rochester as a city, and I replied, it is a huge southern plantation transplanted north. To the question, why was I meddling in the black ghetto after everything that Eastman Kodak had done for the blacks? There had been a bloody riot, National Guard, etc., the previous summer. I looked blank and replied, maybe I am innocent and uninformed of what has been happening here. But as far as I know, the only thing Eastman Kodak has done on the race issue in America has been to introduce color film. The reaction was shock, anger, and resentment from Kodak. They were not being attacked or insulted, they were being laughed at, and this was insufferable. It was the first dart tossed at the big bull. Soon Eastman would become so angry that it would make the kind of charges that finally led to its downfall. That's something I always say is like the worst thing, like the best, like offense against like the political class is mockery. You just mock them, laugh at them. They're ridiculous. They're not worth taking seriously, right? And you mock them and you laugh at them and you tell people, like, look, the reason you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps is because these people can't do anything for you. They're ridiculous people. They're unserious. They're not here to help you. They don't like you. They don't love you. They don't care about you. They only care about lining their own pockets. So, in order to create a situation in which we get a government or a governing body within our communities that actually do care for the people, you have to make yourself powerful in your own life. Therefore, you have the confidence to actually discuss these projects with those that can make these projects happen. But the project isn't going in and asking them to give you money or give you more stuff. The project is going in and making it more free so that you have the ability to further your economic development on your own without their obstructions.
No, you need to protest. You need to make a sign,
Well, fuck, I
or
fucked
we'll
that
give
all
you a
up.
sign. Here's a free sign, Tommy. And you go
Here's your
down
sign.
to City Hall, you hold your sign that says
Like,
people over profits.
what was that? What
Give
was
us
that
money.
comedian's name? Here's your sign. Bill Engvall. When somebody would he would say somebody said something stupid, and he goes, "Well, here's your sign." Yeah, I don't know, man. I that's just the way I look at it. It's like if you if you have a society of people that have bettered themselves and made themselves trustworthy and responsible, then the government will reflect the society that you've created. But if you have a society of people that are worthless, that are unwilling to work for themselves, that are just selfish and don't care about their neighbors or the community around them, then you're going to have a government that reflects that. And that's really what the point is. That was like the whole point of when the founders were saying liberty is left to those is meant for those that are of high moral quality, right? They weren't saying that you had to be perfect. When they said a virtuous people, they weren't saying a perfect people. They were saying a people that communicate and cooperate in in a way that is honest and charitable with their neighbors. Because if you are a people that are honest and charitable with your neighbors, then you're going to expect your government reflect your persona. So that's I mean, and that's what people mean when they say you get the government that you deserve, you know? Like it's really a reflection of the society. The way that the government operates is a reflection of the society. And the more corrupt and debauch and degenerate that society gets, the more corrupt, debauched, and degenerate the government gets. Because look at the pool of people you have to pull from. I don't know. Just it makes sense to
Bill
me.
makes sense to me too. Bill Bupert, our military affairs analyst
Yeah.
at the Libertarian Institute, he likes to say diversity plus proximity equals violence.
Mm.
I really like that equation. I've been thinking about that a lot. And that just to me that tracks through like the deep history of the species. When you have this tribe and this other tribe and they're near each other, you can expect violence.
Yeah.
So whenever you see, and you could like, so when you see violence, that means that you've got some type of diversity and some type of proximity. And the proximity could be like you're on the same planet, here come the cruise missiles from hundreds of miles away. Or it could mean you're in the same bar room and you're a different race or a different class or just different individuals with just beef for whatever reason. So when you do see, though, a lot of diversity and a lot of proximity, but you're not getting the violence or you're not getting as much violence as you might expect, then that means that there's other variables in the equation that are putting like a downward pressure on the diversity and or the proximity. And I think that in a multiracial, multicultural nation is the state. And that's why you get the authoritarian state. Then you reverse that. It's like, well, if you want an authoritarian state, you would make the society more diverse, more antagonistic. And if you can get those people fighting against each other, you can get those people being, more debauched, then it's going to be easier to like rule over all of them.
Hmm.
And
And
even if you have someone who's like, no, no, hit me.
oh, I was going to say, and in today's society, people have such simple minds that they think violence equals strength. So therefore, you get the saying, diversity is our strength. But
Yeah, for the contemporary left, words are violence. Your words
so,
and my words are violence.
so
And then their
diversity is our
violence is
words.
diversity is our greatest strength.
And strength is
I like
violence.
that because
And words are violence. So if
uh,
words and strength are violence, then hey,
violence is responsible rhetoric,
yeah,
depending on who's doing it.
yeah. Again, there's no objective morality. It depends on the objective. So I'm going to be saying that forever now.
I'm going to quote that forever. That's going in
Good.
my book.
Go for it. It's yours. You can have it. I'll forget by tomorrow.
No, I'm going to obviously quote you
Well, I
and use
appreciate that.
this episode as my reference.
Yeah, it's like the only smart thing I've said the entire episode. So I appreciate it.
It's
If I
funny
if
when
I
I
could if
was
I could get my wife to only remember the smart things I've said, like I'd be gold.
you said many smart things this episode, but what's funny is like when I was like a young kid, when I would have like an idea that I thought was cool,
Hmm.
I would be like, oh man, I hope no one's thought of that before. But now, the older, whenever I have a cool idea, I'm like, oh God, I hope somebody had this idea
Yes,
like
yeah,
a thousand years ago and said it.
right. Yes,
Because
I hope.
otherwise, if I'm the first person to think it, there's a good probability it's stupid. But if I can find quotes from like all these pre-modern philosophers and all these Enlightenment cats and even like Islamic scholars, yeah, look at all these people that said this, then there's something to this idea.
Well, not only that, but also the older you get, the more you understand how powerless you actually are. So you just hope that somebody with power actually had the thought and is actually trying to implement it because you're like, I can't do anything about it. So the next question was about my response to a bitter personal denunciation of me from W. Allen Wallace, the president of the University of Rochester and a present director of Eastman Kodak. He had been the head of the Department of Business Administration, formerly at the University of Chicago. He was at the university when it was locked in bitter warfare with the black organization in Woodlawn. Wallace, I replied, which one are you talking about? Wallace of Alabama or Wallace of Rochester? But I guess there isn't any difference. So that was your question? This reply introduced an element of ridicule and it ended any further attacks from the president of the University of Rochester, who began to suspect that he was going to be shafted with razors and that an encounter with me or with my associates was not going to be an academic dialogue. It should be remembered that you can threaten the enemy and get away with it. You can insult and annoy him. But the one thing that is unforgivable and that is certain to get him to react is to laugh at him. This causes an irrational anger. I hesitate to spell out specific applications of these tactics. I remember an unfortunate experience with my Reveille for Radicals in which I collected accounts of particular actions and tactics employed in organizing a number of communities. For some time after the book was published, I got reports that would be organizers were using this book as a manual, and whenever they were confronted with a puzzling situation, they would retreat into some vestibule or alley and thumb through to find the answer. There can be no prescriptions for particular situations because the same situation rarely recurs, any more than history repeats itself. People, pressures, and patterns of power are variables, and a particular combination exists only in a particular time. Even then, the variables are constantly in a state of flux. Tactics must be understood as specific applications of the rules and principles that I have listed above. It is the principles that the organizer must carry with him in battle. To these, he applies his imagination and he relates them tactically to specific situations. For example, I have emphasized and reemphasized that tactics means you do what you can with what you've got, and that power in the main has always gravitated towards those who have money and those whom people follow. The resources of the have nots are no money and lots of people. All right, let's start from there. People can show their power by voting. What else? Well, they have physical bodies. How can they use them? Now a melange of ideas begins to appear. Use the power of the law by making the establishment obey its own rules. Go outside the experience of the enemy. Stay inside the experience of your people. Emphasize tactics that your people will enjoy. The threat is usually more terrifying than the tactic itself. Once all these rules and principles are festering in your imagination, they grow into a synthesis. I suggest that we might buy 100 seats for one of Rochester's symphony concerts. We would select a concert in which the music was relatively quiet. The 100 blacks who would be given the tickets would first be treated to a 3-hour pre concert dinner in the community, in which they would be fed nothing but baked beans, and lots of them. Then the people would go to the symphony hall with obvious consequences. Imagine the scene when the action began. The concert would be over before the first movement. If this be a Freudian slip, so be it. Let's examine this tactic in terms of the concepts mentioned above. First, the disturbance would be utterly outside the experience of the establishment, which was expecting the usual stuff of mass meetings, street demonstrations, confrontations, and parades. Not in their wildest fears would they expect an attack on their prized cultural jewel, their famed symphony orchestra. Second, all of the action would ridicule and make a farce of the law, for there is no law, and there probably never will be, banning natural physical functions. Here you would have a combination not only of noise but also of odor, what you might call natural stink bombs. Regular stink bombs are illegal and cause for immediate arrest, but there would be absolutely nothing here that the police department or the ushers or any other servants of the establishment could do about it. The law would be completely paralyzed. People would recount what had happened in the symphony hall, and that the reaction of the listener would be to crack up in laughter. It would make the Rochester Symphony and the establishment look utterly ridiculous. There would be no way for the authorities to cope with any future attacks of a similar character. What could they do? Demand that people not eat baked beans before coming to a concert? Ban anyone from succumbing to natural urges during the concert? Announce to the world that concerts must not be interpreted by farting? Such talk would destroy the future of the symphony season. Imagine the tension at the opening of any concert. Imagine the feeling of the conductor as he raised his baton. With this would come
Thanks.
huh?
So, well, obviously, what they would do is they would ban unaccompanied teenagers. But what's funny about this part is like these people are really not the enemy that he's um suggesting we ruin their night. And I don't know, I think maybe I said this in a previous episode, but there's that saying you can always hire one half of the poor to kill the other half,
Mm.
which I think is stupid. I mean, I'm sure it has like some truth to it. But like really, if you're like hiring people to kill the poor, you're hiring a small percentage of the middle class. And so like the people who would be like the true enemy of like Alinsky and his compatriots would be like counter-revolutionary, like middle class people who've got more of like a sort of like a Leninist pattern to their background. And this kind of like tactic, let's go ruin the symphony, is just gonna like give like rhetorical purchase to those counter-revolutionaries to like go to these like nice benevolent uh pillars of the community and be like, yeah, you really need to fund our death squads. And I think part of what's going on with Linsky, he's like so bought in that like money is power and it's the corporations that are so evil that he can't really just like see like raw state power as like the fundamental thing that he should be going for. Like if Lenin met him, Lenin would be like disgusting.
Well, the thing about people like this, and you and I have engaged with people that think this way on social media before, is they always point at the haves versus the have-nots, but they do believe that the have a little want mores are just as much of a threat to them as the haves, because the have a little want mores are interested in upward mobility and becoming a have, right? So if you're like me and you've worked your way up through hard work and determination, and it's taken me, 30 years or whatever to get to the position I'm in, even though I'm not really wealthy by any American standards. I mean, if you look internationally, I'm definitely a lot wealthier than people in third world nations are. They would consider me an enemy because I'm not interested in pointing the finger and blaming those that have wealth for my problems. I'm interested only in bettering my circumstances. And that, to me, in my opinion, that does not depend on another person. That depends only on me. Right. And so they would look at me as just as much of an enemy as Elon Musk, not for the same reasons, but they would have just as much disdain for me as they do for him. Right. So it's kind of a ruse the way he talks about this, because in that crowd at the symphony, just like once a year I bring my wife to the ballet, there's going to be a middle class family that just enjoys one night at the symphony every year, and their night was ruined. And that could have been 2 or 3 months of savings to put themselves in a position This man could take his wife out to a nice symphony and sit there and enjoy the music, and their night's ruined because some activists had it out in their minds that everybody in this audience is to blame for their problems. So, but they don't care about that. They only care about pointing the finger. It's got to be somebody else's problem. It's not their poverty is not their own issue. It's everybody else's fault. They're not to blame or responsible for anything that's occurred in their life. It all happens to them. So
It's like
if
the
you
people
it,
that don't produce anything are the reason that we have wealth. The people who produce the wealth, they just stole it
hmm,
from these other people. So that's why we need to tax them to give it back. We're just returning the property to its rightful owners who are exploited by Elon Musk, by Jeff Bezos. There's no way you can become a billionaire.
right.
Um, as AOC recently said, there's no way you can become a billionaire
There's
without
not.
doing some evil shit. It's funny. Someone
I mean, if they
had
keep
was a
printing
compilation.
money, everybody's going to be a billionaire.
Someone did like someone on X had a compilation of Bernie Sanders um, tweets or posts over the years. It was like five of them, and it's like um, millionaires need to pay their full share, and then like millionaires are a danger to the democracy, and like a bunch of them all about millionaires. And then it's like on this date, Bernie Sanders became a millionaire, and his very next post is, "We got to do something about these billionaires."
Yeah. Yeah. He used to say millionaires and billionaires. And then as soon as he became a millionaire, it was just billionaires. But their whole presupposition when they're looking at life, they look at life as happening to you. Like you're not interacting, you have no say in the way your life goes. It happens to you. You are a victim of the result. You're either a victim or you're a chance recipient of the goods of life. Like they don't believe that these people have accomplished anything in order to earn the lifestyle they have. They think that life is something that happens to people and that it's just by chance, by luck, that some people are billionaires and some people are impoverished. That is their entire worldview. And if you look at life as happening to you, then you're paralyzed to do anything about it. So what can you do about it? Well, you can organize and you can threaten the wealthy to give you their stuff.
Gives me that.
Expand?
That's a classic phrase people use on the X to refer to people who demand taxpayer money
Oh.
or things from the government. Like instead of like gives me that, it's gives me that
Oh, got you, got you.
with a bit of a
I thought you said Ismadek. I was like, what the hell's an Ismadek?
I don't know, but gives me that is give me that.
Yeah, I got you. Got you.
Um, no, it's what's like something about this like the whole project that I find funny is like Alinsky's project is where like with like a you're organizing the workers and it's like oh like we it's like this company has managers and it has workers and they're enemies and like the managers are backed by the capital and labor are enemies. So what we want to do is we want to take the workers and make them the managers. And it's like, are you going to make the managers the workers? So you'll still have workers and managers, but except now
Well,
the managers are stupid.
well, and these people have never had jobs. They're community organizers and they've never done anything else other than community organize. So they don't even know what the interactions between a manager and employee are, right? If you're an exceptional employee and you're specialized at your skill, Your manager respects you because your manager knows you know what you're doing. If you're a shitbag who just wants to sit around with his thumb up his ass and do nothing, then yeah, your manager's going to be a pain in your ass. I mean, it's just the way it goes. I'm sorry. I mean, what are we paying you for? We're not paying you to sit around with your thumb up your ass. There are only fans for that. So, with this world comes certain fallouts. On the following morning, the matrons. I was like Macron. Like I was like, what the fuck is Macron doing in this book? The matrons, to whom the symphony season is one of the major social functions, would confront their husbands, both executives and junior executives, at the breakfast table and say, "John, we are not going to have our symphony season ruined by those people. I don't know what they want, but whatever it is, something has got to be done, and this kind of thing has to be stopped." Lastly, we have the universal rule that while one goes outside the experience of the enemy in order to induce confusion and fear, one must not do the same with one's own people, because you do not want them to be confused and fearful. Now, let us examine this rule with reference to the symphony tactic. To start with, the tactic is within the experience of the local people. It also satisfies another rule that the people must enjoy the tactic. Here we have an ambivalent situation. The reaction of the blacks in the ghetto, their laughter when the tactic was proposed, made it clear that the tactic, at least in fantasy, was within their experience. It connected with their hatred of Whitey. The one thing that all oppressed people want to do to their oppressors is shit on them. Here was an approximate way to do this. However, we were also aware that when they found themselves actually in the symphony hall, probably for the first time in their lives, they would find themselves seated amid a mass of whites, many of them in formal dress. The situation would be so much out of their experience that they might congeal and revert back to their previous role. The very idea of doing what they had come to do would be so embarrassing, so mortifying, that they would do almost anything to avoid carrying through with a plan. But we also knew that the baked beans would compel them physically to go through with the tactic regardless of how they felt. I must emphasize that tactics like this are not just cute. Any organizer knows, as a particular tactic grows out of the rules and principles of revolution, that he must always analyze the merit of the tactic and determine its strengths and weaknesses in terms of these same rules. Imagine the scene in the U.S. courtroom in Chicago's recent conspiracy trial of the Seven if the defendants and counsel had anally trumpeted their contempt for Judge Hoffman and the system. What could Judge Hoffman, the bailiffs, or anyone else do? Would the judge have found them in contempt for farting? Here was a tactic for which there was no legal precedent. The press reaction would have stunk up the judge for the rest of time. Another tactic involving the bodily functions developed in Chicago during the days of the Johnson Goldwater campaign. Commitments that were made by the authorities to the Woodlawn Ghetto organization were not being met by the city. The political threat that had originally compelled these commitments was no longer operative. The community organization had no alternative but to support Johnson, and therefore the Democratic administration felt the political threat had evaporated. It must be remembered here that not only is pressure essential to compel the establishment to make its initial concession, but the pressure must be maintained to make the establishment deliver. The second factor seemed to be lost to the Woodlawn organization. Since the organization was blocked in the political arena, new tactics and new arena had to be devised. O'Hare Airport became the target. To begin with, O'Hare is the world's busiest airport. Think for a moment of the common experience of jet travelers. Your stewardess brings you your lunch or dinner. After eating, most people want to go to the lavatory. However, this is often inconvenient because your tray and those of your seat partners are loaded down with dishes. So you wait until the stewardess has removed the trays. By that time, those who are seated closest to the lavatory have got up and the occupied sign is on. So you wait. And in these days of jet travel, the seatbelt sign is soon flashed as the airplane starts its landing approach. You decide to wait until after landing and use the facilities in the terminal. This is obvious to anyone who watches the unloading of passengers at various gates in any airport. Many of the passengers are making a beeline for the men's or ladies' room. With this in mind, the tactic becomes obvious. We tie up the lavatories. In the restrooms, you drop a dime, enter, push the lock on the door, and you can stay there all day. Therefore, the occupation of the sit down toilets presents no problem. It would take just a relatively few people to walk into these cubicles armed with books and newspapers, lock the doors, and tie up all the facilities. What are the police going to do? Break in and demand evidence of legitimate occupancy? Therefore, the ladies' restrooms could be occupied completely. The only problem in the men's lavatories would be the stand up urinals. This too could be taken care of by having groups busy themselves around the airport and then move in on the stand up urinals to line up 4 or 5 deep whenever a flight arrived. An intelligence study was launched to learn how many sit down toilets for both men and women, as well as stand up urinals, there were in the entire O'Hare Airport complex, and how many men and women would be necessary for the nation's first shit in. The consequences of this kind of action would be catastrophic in many ways. People would be desperate for a place to relieve themselves. One can see children yelling at their parents, "Mommy, I've got to go," and desperate mothers surrendering. "All right, well, do it. Do it right here." O'Hare would soon become a shambles. The whole scene would become unbelievably unbelievable, and the laughter and ridicule would be nationwide. It would probably get a front page story in the London Times. It would be a source of great mortification and embarrassment to the city administration. It might even create the kind of emergency in which planes would have to be held up while passengers got back aboard to use the plane's toilet facilities. I wonder if those sailors that flushed their shirts down the toilets in that on that ship in Iran had read this and we're like, fuck that. Let's get this fucking boat back home.
You know what's funny is on the social media, you'll see people say things like the the blacks are the biological weapons of the Jews, and we don't parlay with such vulgar collectivist thinking. We think of people as individuals. But it is funny that here's Zelensky like, you know what I'm going to do with the blacks? I'm going to give them a bunch of beans. And then I'm going to send them to the symphony to ruin the night for Whitey. And then we're going to destroy the bathrooms in the airport. And it's like, if that happened to me, I might be like really like annoyed to the point of like maybe even like slightly radicalized. And I might think like, oh, maybe this is why the CIA was like flooding their communities with crack. Maybe it was like, maybe actually it was for like national security or something. Maybe this is why they're like, just increase the welfare and don't let the father be in the house. We need to like break up this, these communities, or these goddamn organizers are going to ruin the symphony with them.
Hmm. Yeah. Or I could be like, man, all that crack that the CIA gave these black people has caused them to fuck our bathrooms up. I'll be like, crack gives you the shits. So just say no to crack. The threat of this tactic was leaked. Again, there may be a Freudian slip here. And again, so what? Back to the administration. And within 48 hours, the Woodlawn organization found itself in conference with the authorities, who said that they were certainly going to live up to their commitments and they could never understand where anyone got the idea that a promise made by Chicago City Hall would not be observed. At no point then or since has there ever been any open mention of the threat of the O'Hare tactic. Very few of the members of the Woodlawn organization knew how close they were to writing history. With the universal principle that the right things are always done for the wrong reasons and the tactical rule that negatives become positives, we can understand the following examples. In its early history, the organized black ghetto in the Woodlawn neighborhood in Chicago engaged in conflict with the slumlords. It never picketed the local slum tenements or the landlord's office. It selected its blackest blacks and bussed them out to the lily white suburbs of the slum landlord's residence. Their picket signs, which said, "Did you know that Jones, your neighbor, is a slum landlord?" were completely irrelevant. The point was that the pickets knew Jones would be inundated with phone calls from his neighbors. "Jones, before you say a word, let me tell you that those signs are a bunch of lies." Oh, excuse me. "Neighbor, look, Jones, I don't give a damn what you do for a living. All we know is that you get those goddamn niggers out of here or you get out." Jones came out and signed. The pressure that gave us our positive power was the negative of racism in a white society. We exploited it for our own purposes. Let us take one of the negative stereotypes that so many whites have of blacks, that blacks live to sit around eating watermelon. Suppose that 3,000 blacks suddenly descended into the downtown sections of any city, each armed with and munching a huge piece of watermelon. This spectacle would be so far outside the experience of the whites that they would be unnerved and disorganized. I guess the next one, he's going to give them chicken. He gave him beans and watermelon. His chicken's next. Dude, if you gave me
Let's
a
get him
pot
that
of,
grape drink.
motherfucker, you gave me some fried chicken, a watermelon, and some baked beans, I'd be happier than a pig in shit. I'd be sitting outside just chilling. This spectacle would be so far outside the experience of the whites that they would be unnerved and disorganized. In alarm over what the blacks were up to, the establishment would probably react to the advantage of the blacks. Furthermore, the whites would recognize at last the absurdity of their stereotype of black habits. Whites would squirm in embarrassment, knowing that they were being ridiculed. That would be the end of the black watermelon stereotype. I think that this tactic would bring the administration to contact black leadership and ask what their demands were, even if no demands have been made. Here again is a case of doing what you can with what you've got. Another example of doing what you can with what you got is the following. I was lecturing at a college run by a very conservative, almost fundamentalist Protestant denomination. Afterwards, some of the students came to my motel to talk to me. Their problem was that they couldn't have any fun on campus. They weren't permitted to dance or smoke or have a can of beer. I had been talking about the strategy of affecting change in a society, and they wanted to know what tactics they could use to change their situation. I reminded them that a tactic is doing what you can with what you've got. Now, what have you got? I asked. What do they permit you to do? Practically nothing, they said, except, we can chew gum. I said, fine. Gum becomes the weapon. You get 200 or 300 students to get 2 packs of gum each, which is quite a wad. Then you have them drop it on the campus walks. This will cause absolute chaos. Why? With 500 wads of gum, I could paralyze Chicago, stop all the traffic in the loop. They looked at me as though I was some kind of a nut. But about 2 weeks later, I got an ecstatic letter saying, "It worked. It worked. Now we can do just about anything so long as we don't chew gum." As with the slum landlords, one of the major department stores in the nation was brought to heel by the following threat and tactic. Remember the rule: the threat is often more effective than the tactic itself, but only if you are so organized that the establishment knows not only that you have the power to execute the tactic, but that you definitely will. You can't do much bluffing in this game. If you're ever caught bluffing, forget about ever using threats in the future. On that point, you're dead. There is a particular department store that happens to cater to the carriage trade. It attracts many customers on the basis of its label as well as the quality of its merchandise. Because of this, economic boycotts had failed to deter even the black middle class from shopping there. At the time, its employment policies were more restrictive than those of the other stores. Blacks were hired for only the most menial jobs. We made up a tactic. A busy Saturday shopping date was selected. Approximately 3,000 blacks, all dressed up in their good church going suits or dresses, would be bussed downtown. When you put 3,000 blacks on the main floor of a store, even one that covers a square block, suddenly the entire color of the store changes. Any white coming through the revolving doors would take one pop eyed look and assume that somehow he had stepped into Africa. He would keep right on going out of the store. This would end the white trade for the day. For a low income group, shopping is a time consuming experience. For economy means everything. This would mean that every counter would be occupied by potential customers, carefully examining the quality of merchandise and asking, say, at the shirt counter about the material, color, style, cuffs, collars, and price. As the group occupying the clerk's attention around the shirt counters moved to the underwear section, those at the underwear section would replace them at the shirt counter, and the personnel of the store would be constantly occupied. Now, pause to examine the tactic. It is legal. There is no sit in or unlawful occupation of premises. Some thousands of people are in the store shopping. The police are powerless, and you are operating within the law. This operation would go on until an hour before closing time when the group would begin purchasing everything in sight to be delivered COD. This would tie up delivery truck delivery service for at least 2 days, with obvious further heavy financial costs, since all the merchandise would be refused at the time of delivery. The threat was delivered to the authorities through a legitimate and trustworthy channel. Every organization must have 2 or 3 stool pigeons who are trusted by the establishment. These stool pigeons are invaluable as trustworthy lines of communication to the establishment. With all plans ready to go, we began formation of a series of committees: a transportation committee to get the buses, a mobilization committee to work with the ministers to get their people to their buses, and other committees with other specific functions. 2 of the key committees deliberately included one of these stoolies each. I'm sorry. Let me go back. 2 of the key committees deliberately included one of these stoolies each, so that there would be one to back up the other. We knew the plan would be quickly reported back to the department store. The next day, we received a call from the department store for a meeting to discuss new personnel policies and an urgent request that the meeting take place within the next 2 or 3 days, certainly before Saturday. The personnel policies of the store were drastically changed. Overnight, 186 new jobs were open. For the first time, blacks were on the sales floor and in executive training. This is the kind of tactic that can be used by the middle class too. Organized shopping, wholesale buying, plus charging and returning everything on delivery would add accounting costs to their attack on the retailer with the ominous threat of continued repetition. This is far more effective than canceling a charge account. Let's look at the score. Sales for one day are completely shot. Delivery service is tied up for 2 days or more, and the accounting department is screwed up. The total cost is a nightmare for any retailer, and the sword remains hanging over his head. The middle class, too, must learn the nature of the enemy and be able to practice what I have described as mass jujitsu. Who don't know jujitsu? Utilizing the power of one part of the power structure against another part. All
You
right.
know what this all makes me think of?
What's that?
Makes me think of these teen takeovers. You seen these?
Like the flash mob type stuff?
Yeah, like in in downtown areas of cities, all these teens will suddenly show up and take over, and often start fighting each other. And it's like the watermelon thing made me think of that.
Huh.
And so I'm like, because I wonder, like, who's organizing these teen takeovers? Is it just the teens on the social media, like, hey man, let's take over, or are there organizers? They're like, you know what, Whitey believes this stereotype that the blacks are disproportionately violent. So what we're gonna do is have some young blacks take over a part of the city and be violent.
Mm.
That will dispel the stereotype and get us some concessions from the man.
Well, I would say in
But
every
really,
one
it's
of
just,
these. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was saying, it's just fueling like resentment and anger
Mm.
that could be exploited by the counter revolutionary forces that, like you spoke about early um, in this series, the kind of people that would want to infiltrate and hijack any organization's movement as a first step to neutralize it, but would perhaps be willing to escalate from there.
Mm. I was looking when these protests were breaking out, like I think what was it? Was it Milwaukee? No, it was Minnesota, Minneapolis. When they were breaking out there, I was looking, and no, a number of the organizers that were involved had gotten money through oh shit, what do you call it? USAID. It had funneled in through USAID through other large corporations. So USAID would give money out to these like pet projects like the Ford Foundation and stuff like that, and all these NGOs around the world. Well, a lot of some of the money that was going into these organizations in Minneapolis were coming from these NGOs that were then funded by USAID. And you could do that with, you can look at like the BLM movement and all these mass protest movements. USAID isn't directly giving them money, but the NGOs and the organizations that USAID funds is funneling money to them in one way, shape, or form. So, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon and USAID is funding these these destructive political movements in these cities.
It's a color revolution.
Yeah, exactly. All they've done is the Democratic Party has just politicized, has taken this framework of this book and made it their strategy for politics. But well, I was going to stop there, and we will pick up on competition next week.
It's a good place to stop.
I thought so. Plus, my mouth is starting to get dry, and this place on my elbow is starting to hurt. Like I
That's
moved.
right. You're bleeding.
Yeah,
This man's bleeding
look
for
at
the
that.
cause. Damn, Tommy. Need
Yeah,
some
I got
first aid.
yeah, I got blood all over my damn desk. It's like Jesus. So yeah, and it's just it's starting to dry, so it's like hurting every time I move it. It like pulls. So I'm like,
Oh, that's the
stop.
worst.
Yeah, so I want to get a wet towel and wipe this up. But
Clean that up good.
yeah, definitely. But hey, plug whatever you got to plug, man, and we'll end it here.
I just want to plug the Libertarian Institute. Um, I got, I finished this weekend. I finished a new article I've been working on, my follow up to a previous ICE article. And I realized I spent like, not like every day working on it, but I spent a lot of time over like a 2 month period, just reading a lot, talking to a lot of people. I even went and like cultivated some sources. And I'm really excited about it. I gotta like go through it, improve it, and whatnot. But I'm gonna get it to Hunter tomorrow. Hunter Dorenz is my editor at the Institute. I'm really excited about it, and I realized that I would not have had the ability to uh, work on a piece like this and put so much into it if I hadn't been brought into the Institute by Scott Horton. So really appreciate that, and really excited for everything that's going on with the Institute, all the new books that are coming out. Um, and Scott really taken off with Oxford University and Joe Rogan. So if anybody's looking to to donate to the cause of freedom, Libertarian Institute's certainly a great spot to do that.
Yeah, or go to the Scott Horton Academy and take some of his courses, all
Oh
that.
hell yeah, Scott Horton Academy is amazing. I've
Yeah.
seen I've seen most I've taken most of the courses and they're all bangers, really good. And there's gonna be consistently more
Yep.
added to it. So you get in with that lifetime subscription and you just got content forever.
Yep. There you go. All right, man. Well, next week we'll have some more full contact Alinsky, but today I'm a
Be
little
back
banged
at it with
up.
this
Yeah,
crazy fool, Olinsky.
I got a little banged up in today's full contact match, so
Don't let the enemy get you down.
yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'm gonna go get my blood transfusion and some Neosporin and possibly a beer, which will
Yeah.
thin my blood, make me bleed more. So that will stop the
Just keep
recording.
it flowing.